going to be sharing today 10 lessons I've learned from running a digital marketing agency. The picture you see up there is not my digital marketing agency, although I think over the last 14 years I have hired more people than that, but they never all worked for me at once. But we've never been in a high-rise. I don't even know what, you guys tell what city that is? I can't tell. I have no idea. It wasn't a trick question. Anyway, just a little bit about myself. I think some of you know me, some of you don't. I am the owner of T&S Online Marketing. I'm the T, it stands for Tim. The S is sons. I have 3 boys. And then the ampersand is my wife because she holds it all together. She's here today. She doesn't get to hear me make that. It's not a joke. It's a joke, but it's not a joke. So. I have written a few online marketing books. I'll actually be giving away a couple copies at the end of my latest book, Online Marketing Mind Shift, 5 Concepts for Success. So I'll be giving a couple of those away. I am a Superman fan. Sometimes that plays into my talk, sometimes it doesn't. I mentioned I'm the father of 3 boys. They are 13, 10, and 4. And so sometimes that plays in. I'm the husband of 1 wife, Leanne. It's a joke, 1 wife? Okay, anyway. It's true. Again, true, but a joke. And then if I say anything particularly funny, which so far there's not been anything, or particularly insightful, then feel free to tweet it out. This is that's my handle, my Twitter handle. And so I'm Tim J. Priebe everywhere. Essentially, so feel free to do it. This is not going to be a 45-minute commercial for T&S by any means. In fact, the opposite, if anything. But just in case it's of use to you, wanted to make sure you knew what we do at T&S, and this will kind of give you actually some background for what we'll get into as well. So we help primarily in these 6 areas. And we do that either through one-off help, like actually building a thing or designing a thing. We do it through ongoing help, where people have us on retainer, or we just provide consulting and training, and as I put it, we don't actually do any real work in those cases. They just benefit from my 14 years of experience or my teams. So if any of that's worth a conversation, great. If not, that's okay. I also make an offer almost every time I give a talk. So we have a premium, very tactical email newsletter that we send out weekly called Pixel's Online Marketing Tactics and Tools. That guy's Pixel, that's our robot mascot. If you went to our website and signed up for it, it'd be a one-time $500 investment. If you would like to be on there for free, just give me a business card or just your name and email address, but it has to be before you leave today and before I leave today. We both have to still be here. So once I'm out the door, the offer is over. It's really the only way I can do it. But if you'd like to sign up for that, please feel free to give me that info before I go. Okay, as we go through things in these 10 lessons today, there's basically 3 different possibilities of kind of how you'll take in the information I share. Number 1, you'll love it. You'll love the lesson. You'll immediately take it to heart and be able to apply it right away. Number 2, you'll think, well, maybe Tim went through that and learned that lesson, but I don't think that really applies to me. And so there may be some things, hopefully not the whole thing, but some of the 10 lessons that you'll think, well, that just doesn't really apply to my world. Or number 3, the far most likely, is that you'll kind of have to take what I share in my experience and take a few days and figure out how does that adjust, how can I fit that lesson to me and my world. And I'm not claiming to be perfect. I'm not claiming to have completely internalized all these lessons by any means, so a lot of them are still a work in progress, very much so. The other warning I will give you is I tend to follow rabbit trails very easily, so there will be time for questions at the end. If you just can't wait because you're worried you'll forget your question or forget the context or something like that, feel free to stop me, but be warned it may be about 10 minutes before we get back on track because I'm that easily distracted. Is that right, Leanne? Yeah, all right. Okay, any questions before we start jumping into the 10 lessons? All right, good, you learned about the rabbit trail thing. All right, you were listening. All right, first lesson that I have learned is to identify my gaps, and I'm talking about both gaps in myself, obviously, as the co-owner with Leanne of the business, as the person that runs it, and gaps in the actual business. So there's basically two questions that I use now that I've learned over time that help me identify these gaps. So number one is, what is a thing that I've identified I want to change about myself or my company? What do I want to do differently? And then the second question is basically, what's standing in the way? What's causing that gap between where I am and where I want to be? And so there's a couple different ways you can fill any gaps you identify. Some of them have to be filled by yourself. That is not a picture of you, that's a picture of me. But some of them you have to fill yourself, right? So for example, I cannot outsource the getting in good shape, right? The eating healthy cannot be a thing that I completely outsource. I ultimately have to be the one that eats healthy if I want to be healthier. So a key, kind of one big example of this for me in the past few years, I am naturally a night person. Several years ago, I decided I wanted to kind of establish a morning routine. For me, morning is when my self-discipline is the highest. I tend to run out of that self-discipline by the end of the day. I eat very differently at night than I do in the morning. But so I knew I needed more time in the morning than I had. In fact, I knew I really needed to get up. Initially, it was 6 a.m., and then it turned to 5 a.m. Well, for me, before that, it was not unusual. In fact, it was pretty unusual for me to go to bed as early as midnight. I was more of a 1 a.m., sometimes 2 a.m., maybe a couple times a month, 3 a.m. type of person. Anyone else in the room like that? Yeah? So very hard to transition to going to bed at like 9 p.m. Like I used to make fun of the people that went to bed in single digits, right? And so, but I was the only person that could change that, right? Nobody else could change that for me. So I made a commitment for a year solid, and this drove Leanne crazy about 90% of the time, but for a year solid, I was going to be in bed at 9 p.m. almost every day, and I would read for an hour or two, depending on specifics. That was part of the changes I wanted to make. But I had to do that in order to get up at 5 or 6 a.m. in the morning. And so even though I was in charge of the 4-year-old, he wasn't 4 then, but I was in charge of bathing and prepping him for bed, and then I would sit him by Leanne in the living room and go to bed. Everybody else was still awake in the house. She didn't like it. I don't know if maybe she still doesn't like it. But it was a very different change from I was the last one up, and so taking care of any kind of the residual kids. But I made that year commitment, and then I remember at Christmas time, because it happened to be a calendar year, I remember at Christmas time I was up until 11 prepping gifts and everything for the kids for Christmas morning, and remember thinking, man, I haven't been up this late like all year. And it was kind of a crazy feeling, again, because I wouldn't have dreamed of going to bed that early. It just takes hard work, right? When you identify and need to close the gaps, fill those gaps, and it's yourself, it's just going to take hard work. Now, in some cases, though, you can fill it with others. Whoop. That is not what was supposed to happen.
It's cool wallpaper.
Thank you. Come on. Okay, so sometimes you do have to fill it with others. So this is Emily. Emily was my first graphic designer. I ran T&S for about 3, maybe 4 years, somewhere in there, on the side before I went full-time. I decided to take it on full-time. During that period of time, my background is computer science, programming, right? So back then, you basically had to know HTML and CSS to make websites. It's still extremely helpful. Some would say you really should still know HTML and CSS. But anyway, you had to know that. So that was kind of my background was computer science and programming. I also was the designer. That was not a good thing. Okay, I knew my limitations. I knew that I should not be designing because I have a decent eye for design. I just can't make it look good. So that was very frustrating when I was the person actually creating the websites. And so within about 2 weeks, I hired Emily, 2 weeks of going full-time. It happened to coincide with the beginning of the school year, so she was actually a student at Oklahoma Christian University, and came on as an intern. And that's really all the level I needed right there, and even that was kind of a bump up from what I was doing. And she got better over time. She worked for me for about 5 years, and so I've had maybe half a dozen or so graphic designers over the years, but I knew that was a gap that I needed to fill, and I could fill by, not only could I fill it by hiring someone else, but I couldn't train myself to be a good graphic designer. I could certainly train myself to have a better eye for it. In fact, I remember joking with Emily actually one time and saying, well, I wouldn't mind going back to school for graphic design, but I'm not talented. I don't have talent. I think it'd be interesting to know all the theory and everything. She said, oh, there's plenty of people in there that don't have any talent. I said, oh, okay, that's good to know. But anyway, things that you can fill with others, do fill with others, but there are things that you just have to do yourself, or you're in a position where I can't afford to outsource this. I've got to get a minimum level of competent. And so that's really what you do to fill those gaps, in yourself and your business. Okay. Second lesson is create a minimum viable plan. So there are really two kinds of people, non-planners, oh, I didn't warn you about this, and planners. So who here falls under the camp of you tend to be a non-planner? All right, that's the camp I fall into, naturally, by nature. Who falls into the planner camp where you tend to maybe overplan even a little bit sometimes? Okay. So either of those problems, fortunately, can be solved with a minimum viable plan, right? I tend to be the ready, fire type of guy, where Leanne tends to be the ready, aim type of person, maybe eventually fire. And meanwhile, I've shot off about 30 times and not hit the target at all. So that's pretty par for the course with us. So really having a minimum viable plan applies to business, it applies to your personal life, it applies to technical things, it applies to project-based things. Those non-planners, we need something to keep us on track. There's got to be something. Whereas planners need less than they would normally do so that they can actually take action. So a good example of this, anyone done any conversions recently of websites to HTTPS? Yeah, so we know that's kind of a thing right now, obviously, that we should be doing. Google is rolling out some changes in Chrome, theoretically, at some point this month, to make it, if there's any form on your website, there will be a big alert. We don't know what that actually means, but that's all happening. So toward the second half of last month, we'd been slowly converting all our sites, and toward the second half of last month, we said, okay, we got it. We don't know exactly when. Google has said Chrome is doing this in October, so we want to get it done before October. And when we say we want to get it done, we had about just over 100 sites that we provide managed hosting for. So we said that's what we want to do it on. Our 100 plus sites, managed hosting. Who said they'd done that conversion? How long roughly did it take you? Do you remember? To do a site? Just ballpark. 20 minutes, okay. So I did not want to spend that much time per site with 100 plus sites, right? That makes sense. So what I did instead, I did take a weekend to do the project. But again, keep in mind, I had a set of instructions before I started. And I could have just jumped in and done it, and it probably would have taken me 20 minutes for most sites. I would have had some outliers that would have taken, 45 minutes to an hour. I would not have had time to do all the sites I wanted to do in the weekend. So instead, I spent 2 hours at the beginning, which again, this is not natural for me, but I spent 2 hours at the beginning actually planning everything out. I read through the directions before doing them the first time, planned everything out, planned, okay, what things am I not going to do exactly like it says, because I do have 100 plus websites I'm working on. And that 2 hours of prep work meant that I got all 100, I think it was like 108 maybe, 108 websites converted over fully in one weekend. It was quite the weekend, but I got it all done and over with. And for me, that was key. Doing something like that, spending some time at the beginning, I found is hugely helpful, where it had taken us, we'd been working on it for months and months and months, and I finally went in and did the full conversion, and of course had to undo some of the work we'd already done, as happens in those cases, in one weekend. So I do have what I sometimes call an idiot's guide to planning. that I normally talk to people about for their online marketing, but it really applies to anything. And so it's a 3-step process. The first step is set a business goal, and I'm putting business in air quotes this time because if it's personal, right, it could be something personal. Obviously, personal things we do will impact our business as well. But it sets some sort of goal is the first step. Second step is track online or maybe offline milestones. And so actually set up benchmarks for yourself. Like if you're trying to get healthier, it might be specific weight loss goals. It might be specific, you can jog or walk so much in the year or whatever, but have actual milestones toward it. And then block out time, right? Anyone in here do time blocking? Okay. I found it hugely valuable for myself, but if I want something to happen, putting it on a calendar is what makes it happen. I mean, I have family time, I have church, I have date night on the calendar just to make sure it happens. So things that are important to me get put on the calendar. And so, especially if you already live or die by your calendar, you want to block out time to actually do the behaviors. But that's it, right? It's pretty simple. You just have to apply it to your situation and actually sit down and do it. Okay. Third thing is know your finances. We're going to have a quiz. You guys ready? All right. So I'm not going to ask you to define them, but I'm going to ask how many people know what these different words mean. Some of them should be no-brainers, hopefully, but some of them you may not know what they mean. Sales. No? Well, that fits. No, I'm just kidding. Sales. Cost of sales. You guys heard that term before? Okay. Gross margin. Overhead. Fixed overhead versus, what is it? Variable. I was going to say dynamic. Same thing. Net profit. Taxes. We all wish we hadn't heard of that term, right? We wouldn't have roads if it weren't for taxes. Payroll. Maybe not everyone in here deals with payroll, but P&L or P&L, depending on who you ask. Profit and loss. It's a profit and loss statement. Okay, the good news is you can use a cheat sheet. There's not really ever a test. And so you can actually have references, have people you help, but these are all, in general, good financial terms to know. Financial reporting, whether it comes in the form of a P&L or a budget or whatever, is invaluable. We have any QuickBooks users, QuickBooks Online or anything? Okay, that has some great reports in it. We have used CPAs, we've used bookkeepers to help with this. We're actually now using a CFO, an outsourced CFO. We've kind of gotten to the level that that's extremely beneficial to have that third party that cares about your business but doesn't care as much about your feelings, right? And so it can kind of give you the hard, tough news. But staying on top of your finances, knowing what you're doing that's profitable, what's not, based on services, based on products, based on clients, right? It's okay to have outliers. You just want to know and be informed about, hey, this is hopefully not a loss leader, but this is something that I get far less profit on than other things. It's important to know where your money comes from, where it's going, and stay on top of that. Okay, lesson number 4, manage your growth. So unmanaged growth can drive you out of business and be destructive. Like that? Nobody laughed at my picture. I didn't create it, but yeah, unmanaged growth can definitely be destructive, okay? It doesn't matter whether it's employees, whether it's even revenue potentially, especially if you don't have a good handle on your finances. A lot of sales could drive you out of business faster. It could be that it's the workload. It could be any number of things. Unmanaged growth, if you're not careful, can run you out of business, right? We had a period of time, really from roughly 2007 to 2012, where we grew really fast employee-wise, right? So we were adding on employees at I think we maxed out at 9 or 10 of us on our team, including myself, at one point. And unfortunately, that's when our sales, before I learned another lesson that we're going to get to in a minute, that's when our sales were at the all-time low. Well, people still wanted to be paid. It was weird. And so that sustainable, unmanaged growth really hurt us. And we ended up having to scale back really quickly for several years in order to get on top of that again. But obviously, it can happen with actually getting business, new business too, right? Our problem was our business was not matching the number of employees we had. But in the reverse case, workforce or work time not matching the huge amount of work you're getting can definitely be a problem also. You can get into a position where you're making promises you can't keep, and people are asking for timelines, and you fall further and further behind, and it can be painful. So really managing your growth, of course, part of that is understanding those finances we just talked about, is hugely important. A lot of companies you see that look like they're doing really well, and then all of a sudden they're out of business. This is why. They didn't manage their growth properly. Was actually meeting with our CFO, setting some goals for the next couple years, kind of our 3-year roadmap. And I said, well, how about this for a goal? And he was like, nope, that's too high. And I'm like, really? So tell me why. And he said, well, you're in danger if you set that as your sales goal of, based on what I've seen, because he knows all about our books and finances and employees and everything. He said, you're going to be setting yourself up for failure. That's going to be too much growth too fast. And so he scaled me back on that. So just keeping this in mind can honestly keep you from going out of business. Okay. Lesson number 5, get good at sales. Who loves salespeople? Yay. All right, so why do you need to get good at sales? Well, it turns out that if you're on top of your finances, more money actually means less problems, right? Or different problems. But more money, more sales, if your finances are right, can solve a lot of issues. And so you definitely have to get good at sales. So most of you did not raise your hand when I said who loves salespeople. This is crashing. I've never had this crash. Apparently I'm going to go ahead and open Chrome now. Sorry, guys. Several years ago, so just over 6 years ago, I was in a position where I was doing a lot of research on what it took to be good at sales, what it took to get better at sales. I would read book after book after book and get like maybe one little nugget out of the book. And the rest, I thought, well, if this is what it takes, maybe I don't want to be in business. This all sounds kind of tricky and underhanded. Then I was introduced to someone some of you may have heard of. He's a local guy. No, it's not doing anything. Well, I'll just keep going. We may be stuck on this slide. That's right. Anyone heard of Mike Crandall with Sandler Training locally here? So I was introduced to Mike. Now, Mike has a background like in what I call traditional sales now, and so he was still relatively early in Sandler. So to me, at first, he came off kind of as, well, this is a typical sales guy. Yes, I know I need to get better at sales. He provides sales training, sales, leadership, management, training, and consulting. But I thought, well, I mean, all this stuff I read in these books is useless. I don't know how a sales trainer would be any better. So I met Mike. I got to know him over the course of a year. I read a book, which I'll talk about in a minute, that's kind of about Sandler, and decided, okay, this looks different. This looks different enough that let's invest some in it and see what this actually looks like when we go to it. And so it turned out to be hugely beneficial. And so since 2011, we've invested in an ongoing basis, specifically in Sandler training, but in ongoing sales training and sales coaching. And so I have monthly meetings with Mike, and then go to a weekly class almost every week and some different workshops that he puts on. So definitely I would recommend. His stuff is expensive, not going to lie to you. It is expensive, but if you ever hear he's speaking anywhere for free, you should definitely go. Or if it's kind of a one-off workshop that's several hundred and you can scrape it together, I've been to I think every single workshop he offers, and they've all been hugely, hugely beneficial. So, and this is still stuck, even though the timer is counting down, so I don't know what's going on. Okay, So, sixth lesson is to develop a recurring model. So, anyone have recurring kind of baked into what they do already? So, I'm going to pick on you guys and ask what you have. What you're chewing. What do you have in the back that's kind of recurring baked in? Content? Okay. Did you swallow? What do you?
Staffing.
Staffing? Okay. So ongoing revenue based on staffing? Okay. So for us, 14 years ago when we started T&S, right, there was some recurring built in. We just did websites. So we used to be T&S Web Design for years and years. Just a couple years back, changed to T&S Online Marketing. But like the recurring was almost, they were captive because if they didn't know HTML and CSS, well, not even CSS back then. If they didn't know HTML, they couldn't update their own website, right? So if they thought they were going to make changes on an ongoing basis, they had to pay us, right? So we did offer hosting. It was kind of low-end commodity-based hosting at the time. We were reselling, which we still resell, but it looks a little different now. But what happened is we started using WordPress specifically, but a content management system. So our idea was some of our clients occasionally would go out and buy like Dreamweaver or FrontPage or something to edit the HTML without fully knowing HTML. And so we saw WordPress as an opportunity to give them a little more freedom and some more options. Well, what it meant is that we slowly started losing all our website maintenance clients, right? And that was the bulk of our recurring revenue. And it never was really that much recurring revenue in the first place. But the hosting wasn't paying any bills. I mean, that was paying nothing. We were offering, I want to say, like $10 a month hosting at the time. And so it just wasn't good. So unfortunately, we learned about recurring a little too late, where I still had to do that scaling back for a few years that I talked about. But it was really about 6-7 years ago that we started really examining, okay, what could we offer that's within the realm of our expertise that does fall under recurring? And so for us at the time, we had just a handful of clients that said, we want you to manage our social media. We actually had not found, we were looking for a strategic partner, couldn't find one we really liked, and so decided to take that on ourselves. We started managing email newsletters, we started blogging for people, and eventually we changed our hosting model to a managed hosting model, which for us meant keeping up on all the WordPress upgrades and actually making changes to their website for them if they want to. And so now you turn around and we're at somewhere, I want to say around 60% of our revenue is actually based on recurring revenue, where I'm not going out, despite working on sales this whole time, right? I'm not having to go out. If I have a bad month on sales, I'm not shooting myself in the foot. And when I have great months at sales, it's kind of a cumulative effort. So you really want to, if you can figure out a way to build recurring into your model, have that in there. Still not doing anything. It won't even escape out. I won't be able to get any work done the rest of the day. Or I won't have to do any work the rest of the day, maybe. I don't know. No, okay. Okay, lesson 7 is develop your personal network. And so I'm really talking about the people you know, coming to things like this, coming to network opportunities. Expertise, your expertise is only going to be beneficial and only going to make you money if other people know about it, right? And there are definitely great ways to do that online, your website, social media, that sort of thing, but nothing beats kind of the face-to-face connection, whether it's a group setting or whether it's individual one-on-one. So some different things that I've done that have been helpful. I've been in referral groups, like some people call them tips clubs, like BNI. Anyone heard of BNI? Okay. So you just get together on a weekly, twice a month, once a month basis, depending on the group, and you end up talking to each other on a real regular basis and passing referrals. So that's one thing I've done. I've got involved in the chambers, different chambers. You want to be careful. You got to find one that's a good fit for you and or your organization, but you also don't want to get too overzealous and be involved in too many at a time. I think we've been involved in a total of 7 or 8 over the years, some which weren't even in the state, which makes no sense. That was a horrible decision. We didn't spend a lot of money on it, but it was kind of a futile effort. Anyone in here members of a chamber right now? What are you guys in?
We're in the Northwest
Chamber?
Just the Oklahoma City Chamber.
Oklahoma City Chamber. Both good chambers. We currently are active in 2. And so that keeps kind of our plate full as far as what we can actually do. We're in the Northwest Chamber as well. We found that to be a real good one. And then I'm biased. I'm about to be on the board, just so you know, so that's another point in here. But I am biased towards that chamber. But then the Edmond Chamber. We're located in Edmond. Leanne and I live in Edmond, and so the Edmond Chamber made a lot of sense as well. But don't be in too many, but also don't be afraid to switch chambers if it looks like that one's not a good fit for you. And then associations and just groups like this that meet on a regular basis. Obviously, for somewhat related to what we all do in here, there's the American Marketing Association. There is business, what is the one? Man, I just drew a total blank. Leanne, what's the association I'm on the board of with Linda? IABC, International Association of Business Communicators. Thank you, man. Obviously, I'm real good at communicating. I can't even remember the name of the association. But there's a number of good ones out there. Ad Club's another one as well. And so joining associations can be beneficial. You got to stay in them over time, right? The same thing applies eventually to chambers once you find the one that's a good fit. I remember at one of my first chamber meetings, I was introducing myself to a guy, had these brand new business cards. I think I'd printed them myself at home at the time. We'll just assume Vistaprint was not a thing then, and we already know I didn't have any design skills. But I was out at the chamber event passing out these cards, talking to people, and this guy said, and he probably didn't think anything of it, but I remember it, 13, 14 years later. He said, "Hey, great to have you here. We see a lot of web people here. For some reason, most of them don't stick around, so I hope you stay." And I thought, well, if all I have to do to stand out is keep coming, I can do that. And so kept coming, and really till the last couple of years, that was the Edmond Chamber. That was the first one I was in, back when I didn't know you could be in other chambers that weren't in your geographic area directly. But just till the past couple of years, have been real heavily involved in the Edmond Chamber, and kind of scaled back a little bit over the last couple. But yeah, some of it is just coming and going consistently, even when you don't feel like it. Anyone else in here introverted or occasionally feel introverted? Or get behind the 8 ball on work you need to get done? This still has to be a priority. Still has to be a priority to build your business to continually network. Okay, lesson 8, read. So reading, continually educating yourself, hugely important. You want to read, obviously, books, articles specific to what you do. Web design, whether that's web design or different areas of digital marketing. You want to read books that are kind of more broad, ancillary, like running a business, right? Or even marketing in general. Business biographies can be great. You have to be careful sometimes, because a lot of times they'll kind of gloss over the person's shortcomings, or they won't talk about the actual sacrifices they made, or how they suffered in their personal life as a result of running businesses. So you got to read between the lines a little bit. But those books can be hugely helpful. Or just books, like I said, books on running a business. So I've got 4 kind of general books that I think really apply to any business that I recommend. Had great screenshots and short summaries of the books on here. I will just give you the titles. So 4 books. The E-Myth Revisited. Anyone read that? So that was a hard lesson for me to learn about how I couldn't just be a programmer sitting in my office and run a successful business. There were other roles in the business that I needed to fulfill besides the expert role that I had at the time. The Slight Edge. Anyone read that book? All right. So The Slight Edge is all about how very minor decisions and behaviors can have a huge positive cumulative effect. And so that's a good one. The Fortune Cookie Principle. Anyone read that one? Man, you guys. Fortune Cookie Principle is all about having some sort of extra that's a core part of your business, like the fortune is in a fortune cookie. And then the book at Sandler that kind of actually introduced me to the overview of what Sandler was all about. This is a very long, unwieldy title, but it is You Can't Teach a Kid to Ride a Bike at a Seminar. So that's a good one as well, specifically for the area of sales. And then finally on reading, you got to execute it, right? I'm kind of a knowledge junkie, and I tend to suffer from the problem of reading a lot of books in a short period of time and maybe not executing some of them like I should, most of them, by nature anyway. I love the books that at the end of a chapter have several exercises that you're supposed to do, because I will stop and do the exercises and actually get way more out of the book. But if they don't, I'll actually, a lot of times now, take notes, like actually write things down and go back and review my notes at the end. What have I learned from this? What lessons do I want to take away? Again, not natural for everyone, but I've found that doing that and reading with just some more intentionality, not just for fun, can be really helpful. Lesson 9, seek outside counsel. This can be either one-on-one interactions or group interactions. Sometimes if you're paying for it, a group environment can be more affordable, definitely. But we've been involved in all sorts of different outside counsel. Of course, I'm not talking about attorneys, by the way. Although attorneys are valuable, don't get me wrong. But just seeking that outside expert opinion in their area. So we've worked, I mentioned Mike Crandall at Sandler Training we've worked with as a sales coach and trainer. We've worked with a business coach. Anyone in here ever worked with a business coach at all? Hugely valuable for us early on. It helped us really through some major transitions in moving it from a side job into a full-time thing, which is about the time frame that it happened. Peer advisory groups, anyone heard of or been involved in any peer advisory groups? Okay, so peer advisory group is where you meet with a group of other business owners, right? They may be in similar industry to you, or they may be in completely different industries, but just have a similar role to you in the company. And so that can be hugely helpful. Some of those are paid, some of those you pay a facilitator, and some of them you can just form one yourself and just kind of have a topic every month or however often you meet. So those are some different things we've been involved in. And then through the chambers especially, and you don't always even have to be a chamber member, there's a lot of educational opportunities available to you. Actually, I'm teaching maybe next week on Thursday. Don't hold me to it. You should check their website. But through the Edmond Chamber, teaching a class on LinkedIn. And I believe it's free to the general public, so free to both chamber members and non-chamber members. I do a similar class for Google, or about Google for the Northwest Chamber, Northwest Oklahoma City Chamber. But there's always opportunities on getting better at all these different gaps that we've talked about. All these lessons I've learned, they teach classes on almost all of it. Mike Crandall teaches a class through the Northwest Oklahoma City Chamber on networking. So kind of some overlap in multiple lessons here. Okay, lesson number 10. So this is the final lesson. And this is really more of a personal philosophy for me, but it's something I've translated into business as well, is give back before it's comfortable. So give back before it's comfortable. Obviously, if you create websites, there's opportunities to do pro bono, one-off websites that can help you build up your portfolio. That's true. But really, I would encourage you to go beyond that and make it kind of even an ongoing thing. So how we've done this at T&S, and for me personally, I mean, I do have definitely some personal things I do, but as a business, I've structured our organization in that we have kind of some pay what you can options for nonprofits. That's a big way we give back. And then we actually do some volunteer work roughly every other month as an organization for different nonprofits in the area. In fact, I think we have one coming up early next month. I don't know. I don't have my calendar in front of me. But there's always opportunities to give back. It doesn't have to mean donating money, right? It doesn't necessarily have to mean donating time. Sometimes it's just making connections between people. A nonprofit I'm involved in that I'm on the board of right now actually introduced to one of the graphic designers that we work with, made that introduction, and she ended up donating some services to the nonprofit. You can also do board service, which, be forewarned, anyone served on a board before? Okay, boards are drastically different from organization to organization, definitely. So do some research and find out what you're actually getting into. Some boards, you basically go to an hour-long meeting every month or every other month or every quarter, and that's it. Other boards are very much hands-on, and you're involved in the fundraising, and it's really, it's probably, several days a month of actual work to be on the board. So, but I would encourage you to look into it if you'd like to. You can always reach out to organizations. You don't have to wait for them to come to you. You can reach out and say, hey, I'm interested in serving on a board. I like what I see about your organization. Can you tell me more about it? So the problem most people run into is we don't have tons of free time. We don't have tons of free money. And so it's uncomfortable for us to give back early on. I'd say go ahead and get in the habit of doing it when you don't have a lot, and then it becomes much easier and habitual later on. And that's it. We've got about 10 minutes for questions. If anyone has any, I'm happy to answer them. Yes, sir.
I've talked to different kind of small agency owners about kind of finding your sweet spot as far as what types of projects you take on or what you would enjoy doing. Like if you were to take on a one-time project right now, like what's your ideal kind of situation?
So kind of our 6 core services that we talked about before. Now, just from a business standpoint, we like recurring content best now. And there are certain kind of websites that we know. If there's a website with a lot of custom programming involved in it, we're not going to be a good fit for that. If it's a real heavy-duty e-commerce website, we're not going to be a good fit for that. For us, we kind of did it the hard way, where we just took a long time and had a long period of time where we took on anything, and just over time narrowed down the types of services we like and the types of clients we like to work with. And so I found both of those were really valuable, and probably another lesson is to work hard at identifying. And you may just be picking initially, kind of, hey, what do I think I like? But work really hard at identifying the services. And I found the types of clients are just as important. And whether that's industry-based or there's other qualifiers in there. One thing for us and we still do, but we did business kind of across the U.S., right? Well, what we found is the people we enjoyed working with the most were when they were local Oklahoma City metro people. And so all of a sudden, that made a lot of decisions easier for us, whether it was sales related or marketing related or just how we ran our business. It became easier to make those decisions. And so I know that's actually helpful in knowing how to kind of narrow the services down, but it's definitely important. Services and your ideal client, what do those both look like? Other questions? Yes, Rick.
Have you ever had a difficult talk with clients in regards to, this actually came up in an advisory board meeting today, about how their design choice isn't that great? How do you approach that? Do you just let them run with it and let them take ownership, or do you try to steer?
I make my designer have those conversations, Holly. No, we actually, it's an ongoing battle. I mean, there's never an easy answer. Literally, she was talking to me about that very problem in a group educational setting we were in Tuesday, which was yesterday. Wow, yeah. So there's no easy answer. Part of what we do to make that happen less often is we've identified our ideal client does not want to hire the cheapest, and they want to hire someone for their expertise. And so at the beginning, part of our conversation is, hey, we just want you to know we're not going to be the cheapest. We can help you find like a college kid if you want to hire someone that's going to be kind of the far less expensive option, and they'll probably they're not going to have the 14 years of expertise we do, but they're going to be far less expensive. Or are you wanting to pay extra for that expertise? And so we do make it part of the initial conversation. That doesn't always get rid of it. It decreases how many of those conversations we have to have, but it doesn't eliminate it. Our philosophy is that ultimately it's the client's website. And so if we do due diligence and give them our expertise advice, but they're paying for the website, then we will make it how they've asked us to make it. We make sure we warn them. We may take website by T&S Online Marketing off of the footer and not include it in our portfolio, but it's their money, their website, and so we'll do ultimately. There's only been I can think of one specific case in 14 years where I just refunded a client his money instead. But in general, that's kind of our philosophy. Any other questions? Let me do the book giveaway before I forget. Does anyone already have a copy? You already have a copy. Okay. Then I will exclude you from the drawing. You have as many copies as you want.
Can I add a question?
Yes.
You said you've been doing this for 15 years.
For-
How long do you see yourself going on?
6 months tops. No, it's hard to say because the industry changes so rapidly that, there could be, something could happen. Net neutrality or any number of things could greatly affect our industry to the point where, you know, 95% of us are out of business. So there are things like that that certainly could happen. So without knowing the answer to that, I love what I do because I'm helping. Part of our ideal client ensures that our point of contact is someone that has a direct impact on the business, right? So if you're like fourth down the food chain, you're going to be our main point of contact, we're not going to be a good fit for you. And so a big part of it for me is making a huge difference in that person's business or in their stress level or whatever that looks like. And so as long as what I'm doing is still doing that for them, I'll probably do this till I keel over at my desk. So I can't see ever retiring. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay.